So what we're going to talk a bit about today is sort of time management, this concept of clock time versus real time, the 5 steps in which you can help better integrate those two different concepts, that ever elusive concept of balance. I think we can all sort of recognize that one. Talking a little bit about the opportunity cost of graduate school and how we can break that down a little bit about your wellness wheel, and then some of the sort of school stuff that we have here, the resources we have for you as graduate students. So first subject we're going to talk about a little bit is time management.
So the premise, for those of you who haven't heard of Jeopardy, is that this is the answer to a question, and we are looking for the question. So the answer to this question is 168. So our answer is 168. Who wants to tell me what the question is? Give it a try.
How many students work?
I like that, where you're going. Close? No, that's, I don't know how many of our students work, but that's a good idea. We're talking about time management. You're on the right track.
What is the number of hours in a week?
Ding, 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 ding! We have a winner! The final Jeopardy question was, how many hours are there in 1 week? And you have the same amount of hours that I have, that Travis has, each of you has the same amount of hours. And so that's the one thing I think we have to align with reality, is that all of us have the same amount of hours. So there's this concept of clock time versus real time. So the premise of clock time is that all time is created equal. But do you believe all time is created equal? Why not?
I dedicate more time to things that I find of importance.
So in most time management systems, though, that you have are based on clock time, right? It's a calendar with days of the week, or it's a sheet with hours on the day. It's all based on clock time. But real time is sort of created up here, because how many of you heard the phrase, time flies when you're having fun? Does time really fly? Did that minutes go any faster than the minutes beforehand? No? It didn't, right? So that's that real time we talk about, because there are tasks that feel like it's a lot faster, and there are tasks that make it feel like we have been doing it forever, even though you look down and I've only been reading that chapter for half an hour. I swear to God, it's time to go to bed and it's 12:30. So that's what we have to kind of align, is that real time versus clock time and how we deal with those concepts, because our world is kind of built on clock time when that's not exactly the only consideration.
So yeah, this idea that time is relative and it has a lot to do with perception. So the big thing in integrating sort of clock time with your real time is, first and foremost, is determine how much time you spend on certain sort of tasks and certain sort of items. And then identify sort of real time gains and losses, knowing a little bit about yourself and knowing which things are a little more fly by and which ones maybe drag on a little bit. The next one is to sort of determine a realistic schedule with your sort of your real time, all right? I think one of the biggest things I can say with anybody, especially as graduate students, as you've been through school for a long time, is being honest with yourself and recognizing those and moving on from there. And then always kind of plan for the unexpected, because that stuff is going to happen, especially as you get more responsibilities and you become more and more independent, and graduate school is part of your greater life. And then sort of the last thing is treat yourself. Reward and celebrate those times when, you do something well and you do sort of get that time management down. And anytime it doesn't quite work out, making adjustments. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
So you can go about this a lot of ways, all right? And what might work for me might not work for y'all, all right? So one of the big things, though, is at least sort of gauging what you're doing and writing it down and actually examining. Especially as graduate students, this is the point where they're actually asking you to examine a lot of things. But sometimes we forget about examining our own time and what we actually do, because we get in such routines and such sort of ruts on occasion. But if you actually step back and look at it, seeing where your time is going. So this can be through a journal, this can be through, which is on the back of one of those, a weekly block schedule of actually sort of checking out and seeing actually where your time is going. Make sure you do break it down, though, when you do it, because you have certain things that you're going to know you're going to do every week. You're going to be in class. If you have a GA, you're going to be at work. If you have certain things you do every week, whether you go to church or you have sort of family sort of things that you have to do every week. Sort of writing that down, and then writing down and seeing what you're doing with your free time. If you have work elsewhere, and then the things that sometimes we might not remember is those times where drive time, eating time, where it's like those things are part of your schedule, and sometimes we forget those, especially when you sort of get in that zone.
And over here, we just listed a bunch of things that you may want to remember, like Travis mentioned, your travel time, your commute time. Sometimes you forget that. Hygiene time, Netflix and chill time. Believe it or not, we want to plan for some of this, okay? And sometimes we need to plan for that so that we make these things happen. So it's important. Research says that if you keep a journal with all of this, and I mean detailed all of this, for a week, it gives you your best idea of seeing where your time is really being spent. And it's really, if you take and dedicate yourself to doing this for 1 week, you will be surprised, I promise. I've never had someone who's done this task for a week that didn't come back to me and say, I was shocked. Like I thought I was a guru at managing my time, and all of a sudden I learned, if you're honest with yourself about all of the activities, not just the ones that we all always write down on our planner.
Because I think a big thing is, like, we're going to talk a lot about academic stuff, but you all are students here, but you have big lives outside of here. And we want to, starting out with, we're going to talk about it a little later, that's starting out with this idea of balance and including all that stuff so you're whole people and we don't feel like you're just grinding through your whole experience.
We want you to start identifying some of those real-time gains and real-time loss activities. So what are some things you enjoy doing?
I spend a lot of my outside time traveling, so like weekends I don't normally spend in Vegas.
Because you enjoy that. So that's a way
That's a good thing.
So that's going to go fast and you're going to enjoy that. That's really going to be considered one of your time gains. How about you?
I like to write fiction.
Nice.
Oh, fantastic. Have you written anything we know yet?
Oh gosh, no.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay.
I think that's fantastic.
Just playing with my kids.
There you go.
And that's so important. And that really energizes you probably, right? So you're going to want to highlight some of those things. And is anybody like this guy? Travis, do you like laundry?
I'm going to be honest, I don't like laundry, I don't like cleaning up, and acknowledge that about myself. I actually invest in having a maid come every 2 weeks to do that. I'm sorry.
That is so smart, right? Because you figured out where you can gain some time. Because it might take you 3 times as long in that time value. I personally love laundry. It's weird, isn't it? The one household task I love. I don't cook, but I love laundry. And here's why. It's the one task I feel like you can start at the beginning with this big pile of dirty clothes. You can get through the whole process and put it all away. So I feel like it's one of the few tasks that you can complete the whole thing. And I can see an accomplishment.
Does it drive you insane when you lose a sock?
It does. Oh.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
terrible. The lost sock thing, I will look. Yeah,
You're
no,
gonna
don't even
find that
start.
sock,
Yeah,
okay.
that's really bad.
Sorry.
But like cooking makes me crazy because I spend all this effort and people eat it and it's all gone. I feel like, oh, I just like my wasted
Yeah.
effort. At least with laundry, I see a terrible dirty pile. Then I see this great aha moment at the end. So for me, it's a time gain. It's
Very good metaphorical cause and effect.
So yeah, so those are some of the things you're going to want to identify as you get this down, because you want to mix in real-time gains with real-time losses. You don't really want to have 2 of those losses next to each other, because what's the rest of your day going to feel like? It's going to drain you of everything, right? It's just going to be a vampire and suck the life out of you. So that's why it's important for you to have identified those real-time gain type activities and real-time losses so that you can intermix them. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I love this. I want to start with this graphic because I just love it. So we have this poor sad person, and the extrovert says, I'm staying in tonight. And the exact same comment from the introvert who goes, I'm staying in tonight. So it's so important for us to recognize what activities do to us as a person and how our personality impacts that clock time, okay? Because for this person, that night's probably going to drag on, right? It's going to be terrible, it's going to be depressing because they're so sad that they stayed home. This person is going to be so happy, the time's going to fly by, they can't believe it's already whatever time it is because they're so happy. So understanding who you are really is important when you're taking into account your schedule. So for example, some of the characteristics of it.
And I can actually take this a little bit because this is me, I'm the introvert. So I'm very much, I can be sociable, but afterwards I need that time to recharge. You know, I need that time to be alone and sort of sit with my thoughts. It's a productive sort of exercise for me. And usually, like it's mentioned earlier, I need a lot more sort of knowledge and data to get going and moving on something. So even though it might look like I'm not being productive, something is going on in my head and I need to sort of schedule those times, whether it is like utilizing like drive time, like just taking a drive and like sort of messing around with my thoughts for that and being a little more productive with that. And a lot of times I'm very easily distracted. I need my quiet space. That's why I like the graduate commons, because I can sit in my little corner and be focused in on that. I can't do it at home because there's too many things going on, too many temptations and distractions. So I've identified that self within me, and I will drive all the way over here just to be productive.
So I guess I should take the extrovert, you think? Alrighty, so socializing energizes you. I love being out with people. I am a quick decision maker. Travis will probably attest to that fact.
Yes.
I do enjoy my group work, and I don't like to be alone too long. Like even when I'm home, I like the television on while I'm working. I mean, I'm writing my dissertation, I've got the TV on, and I got something else going in the other room. If it's all quiet, I'm like, oh, what's going on? I couldn't do it. So, but that's important for me to know about myself. And so even when I'm working in groups, it's important for me to understand the different components so that if there are different parts of the project, I need to understand and know that we might need to take more time if we have some group members who are introverts, because they might need more data to make those decisions. So planning those things out is very important, because for me, a quick decision, I'm like, oh, I could have done that in 5 minutes, but I need to understand and plan so that if I'm working with other individuals, that we have that proper time, because that's how my schedule can get messed up otherwise, right? Because I thought, well, for me, it would only take me 5 minutes to make that decision. But understanding the other components, I may need to plan an hour for that decision, because that's what they need to get there. So that's why it's so much more than just, putting just that down the time. You need to kind of be thinking about all these other components that go into time management.
What are some of the things you all use currently for time management?
I use a planner.
Planner.
I hold like a planner and a calendar
Yep.
in my kitchen.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm addicted to the reminders on my phone.
Reminders on your phone. Yeah. Anything else anybody uses? It's mine.
No list
I
people?
make lists.
Lists. There we
I had
go.
to have a list person.
Yeah,
I always have a list
list
person.
All right. Any other? About the same? Okay. So the big thing with any of this is like learning what works for you. All right. I mean, the biggest ones obviously are sort of the actual sort of physical mediums, and then the newer ones of your phone or other digital technologies, and finding out what works for you, or using them all together so that you kind of find a system that works. I have some lists. I have my Google Calendar, and I have my actual in-life calendar. The big thing is like none of them are wrong. It's what works for you. I mean, personally, I think my phone is the devil, so I tend to avoid it. But I'm not gonna say that it's not a useful tool. All right. The biggest thing is just sort of identifying that, because the phone for me is a little bit of a distraction. All right. For others, it is not. So just knowing that and recognizing that as you move forward. So
And so for me, I have to have multiple calendars. Like one is too confusing to me, it's overwhelming. So I actually have 3 calendars. I use my digital Google Calendar for my work obligations with other people. So that's when I have to meet with other people. So that's there, and it comes up in my little watch here, so when I'm supposed to be someplace, it pops on there and tells me I'm supposed to be someplace. It's wonderful. But then for my work projects, I actually have a physical work agenda, because I can keep notes in it and I can plan out stuff and all of that. But then I also found I don't want to incorporate my personal stuff in there, so my personal calendar, like 8 to 5 is just marked out work. But then all of those are on the work agenda. Then my personal agenda has all the personal appointments that I have, after work things I may need to do like laundry, Netflix, whatever it is. So for me, it feels like I need to kind of separate those out. It just works better for me. But some people need it on one big master place.
because some it's going to be a little different. Some people like the big picture and seeing how everything interacts. Some people like to keep it a little more separate and getting a little more into the minor details. But finding out what works for you is always going to be the determining factor. And usually at the beginning of the semester is the best time to try it out. before things get rolling, and you can actually try and experiment, and then being honest with yourself, what worked, what didn't. Are you getting the outcomes that you want from your time management style right now?
I want to talk about life happens, because life happens. And I think it's so important for us to acknowledge that life happens, because that's where we can get off track. And I've seen more students over the years get off track because a life happens moment happened and they hadn't thought about it and prepared for it, and then they were done. So all the way back to Buddhist philosophy goes with planning kind of like for the worst case scenario. So you plan for the worst, but you hope for the best. And I think that that's a really good idea. So we have some scenarios where we're going to break into groups, but I actually think maybe we'll just do a few of these as the whole group. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, we can just talk it out.
Okay, so I'll read the scenario, then maybe you can lead the discussion.
Okay.
So these are just some typical scenarios that have happened, and we just want to talk about like how could you have prepared for this scenario beforehand, and then what could you do in the moment. And sometimes just having a plan like that, hopefully it never happens to you, but since you've already talked about it, you're not as panicked when it does happen. So the first one I talk about is a transportation scenario. Or do you want to take that?
I can take this. You wake up in the morning, all ready to go to work. You go to your car, and your car has a flat. This quite happened to me last week on Thursday. All right.
And
So
Travis had a big presentation at the
big
end of the
presentation,
college.
ready to go. All right. So I think the next big question is like, what
What do you do?
There's a number of things that you can do, I think.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
could call a friend to come get you.
Mm-hmm.
You could do like Uber, Lyft.
Yep. Yeah.
If you live nearby, you can walk or ride a
Yeah.
bike.
Exactly, but knowing those things up front.
Yep.
So Uber or Lyft, knowing how to use them. They are really great.
Yeah.
If you haven't been out on the commons lately, they're handing out free coupons, so if you've never used them, I'm telling everybody to go grab the free coupons, stick it in your wallet if you've never used it before, because that way that one time you do need it, money's not gonna be your problem, because it's good for a free ride. So at least you've got and that can be your emergency card, it's got all the instructions on how to do it, perfect. So that's that preparation in advance that we talk about, because when you're in the moment, you probably started to sweat bullets, right?
Started to sweat bullets a little bit, but the big thing that I, assessed the situation. I went down there to get my spare tire, got everything out, and the big problem. So, well, it's one of those things where I should have planned and prepared, and it's not like I have to check on that constantly, but it's more of a thing I should have known whether or not I had that. I only assumed, and that kind of sort of bit me in the behind a little bit on that one. So I actually called AAA and please help me. And then got that under control. It was still on time for my presentation. Everything worked out all right, but it was a simple thing of me doing a small amount of preparation so that something like that doesn't happen. And then immediately installed Uber on my phone afterwards because somebody said that to me after, you should just Uber. I was like, yeah, I should have just Ubered.
But if you've never done it, you don't have the app, and you're not comfortable, that previous just idea of knowing it, and then, oh yeah, we had that discussion. So here's another one that I've seen derail more than one student and almost get them to quit. So you just realized you did not submit an assignment that was due yesterday. The assignment was required and worth 25% of your grade. You're crying about it just thinking about it, aren't you? So what do you do?
Email the professor.
Communication. Okay, so what could you have done beforehand?
Just be diligent, double check, go through the motions of it.
For school, I've learned redundancy. That's the one thing that makes it, if there's a big thing on all of my calendars. Redundancy, the more times I can, because if one fails, hopefully something else won't. So I also have I had a doc buddy. We're finished with all of our coursework, we're just doing dissertation, but during doc studies I had a doc buddy, and we would be accountable to each other. So when we had those really big deadlines, hey, you know that, don't forget, we text each other. So build those relationships, because that can help you too in those cases. But the communication is key.
Communication is key. The first assignment I ever turned in for my graduate program here was through email. Emailed it, good to go. I get an email in the middle of the night that I see the next morning, it's like, it didn't make it. No joke, it's like, you want to see a big man cry, nobody wants to see that. It was like, nope, done. You're not set out for this, but it was a simple thing of, building that communication, talking with your professor, and more so even checking that and seeing, making sure that it happened, that it actually got through, and confirming.
Yeah, I mean, we want to double, triple, quadruple check those things, so we're just working up to the very last thing. I now put all of my stuff in the day before. What I would do is put every assignment that was due the day before. So in my mind, by that time I'd forget about it, because in grad school our assignments are usually pretty far out. It's not like we have them every day. So I just put them in the day before. I would forget even half the time, and I'd be turning it in. And somebody'd I'd be like, oh, did you turn that assignment in? They're like, it's not due till tomorrow. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I put everything in a day before. It kind of scared a few people in my program.
Yeah, I've definitely had that.
But it works, because you kind of trick yourself.
I mean, I'm sure we've all sort of faced this one. So you have an assignment due tonight at 11:59. You get home from a class late and plan to submit it after you eat dinner. You get onto your computer and you find the internet doesn't work. What do you do?
Go to Starbucks.
Nice.
I love
Yeah.
that. Some of you may not know, but most of your phones are a hotspot. You can check that out. Check with your phone provider. Depending on your data plan, it may take a little bit of data, but sometimes that, that's spending those extra few dollars. But most smartphones today also have the ability to be a hotspot. I've actually, using my smartphone, I've actually taught an entire live lecture off of this. From my computer, just using it as a Wi-Fi hotspot and doing it from my WebEx from my computer. So it has a lot more capability than you think, but you have to know how to do that. So again, this is that planning in advance. What happens if my internet's down? Knowing where your Wi-Fi spots are. Knowing what other technology you have available. And then of course, if you can, not waiting till 11:59 to submit it. But we all do it. I mean, we do.
Yep.
That's just reality of how we work in grad school. We're getting everything done just in the nick of time.
My reflection on this one was McDonald's. They all have Wi-Fi. They're also open later, and most of the time you can access it even from
Have
your
your car.
car.
I've done it that way too. I've got my
Because
car.
in general, I recommend don't going into McDonald's. I'm just not a fan.
Every casino in town has Wi-Fi. So if you need to go someplace where it's safe and inside to get those last few minutes done, there is another place if your electric goes out or something that you need to write that last few minutes of that paper. They all have Wi-Fi. You can find a little chair to sit on, and you'll see many people, if you start to look around, you'll be like, hey, I know what you're doing. All right, the last one I wanted to talk about, because you mentioned you have kids, and my daughter actually just graduated from law school, but when I did my master's many years ago, I had a little one at home. So someone who you are a caregiver for has woken up sick. You're supposed to be in class today for a presentation. What do you do? So, but you want to have those conversations beforehand. So you kind of want to have your backup plan in place. So if you're a caregiver for a parent, for a spouse, for a child, you want to have those communications before that morning. Many times we might have siblings that we're responsible for, or parents. But by having those conversations with the whole family before, at the beginning of the semester, hey, these are my days that I cannot, I need you to be there. Just that communication up front can really save you a lot in the long run, because we're stressed enough when these things happen.
I think the biggest thing with any of this is just like, you do your research in graduate school and you're trying to, find out something about it, is that you look into it, you actually do the research and see how everything aligns, and then acknowledge what works and sort of acknowledge what doesn't, right? Because your goal is, I'm sure everybody has something in mind of like what you're going to get out of this, correct? Like whether it's a degree or whether it's I'm doing this 4.0, and that making sure that if what you're doing doesn't align with your goals that you're setting, that's the time to examine and see if you want to change. I know you like this quote.
I do and I don't. It kind of makes me feel bad about my life sometimes, but we talked about the 160 hours, which we all have, and this quote kind of reminds us of that too. It says, don't say you don't have enough time. You have exactly the same number of hours per day that were given to Helen Keller, Pasteur, Michelangelo, Mother Teresa, Leonardo da Vinci, Thomas Jefferson, and Albert Einstein. So I go, well, yeah, when I'm complaining I don't have enough time, I really start to feel bad about myself, and I think, oh my goodness, look at everything they've accomplished, and I have not accomplished anything close to that in my 168 hours a week. But it's
We're getting there.
We're getting there. But it's good for us to remember, because sometimes we can just feel really, really like there's just no way we can get this done, right? It's just not possible. But really, other people besides us have managed to get it done. We have to maybe make some adjustments so that we can do it or figure out realigning our priorities. But it is possible to live week by week and get things done.
So the ever elusive unicorn of a creature that is balance. All right, so balance in life is something that is definitely probably even tougher as you go along and tougher as you get into higher levels of academia, especially as you get more of a life outside of it. So finding that balance is a huge thing.
So there's a lot of opportunity cost for this experience that you're going through, right? So it's not just the money that you're paying to UNLV, okay? That's, in my opinion, a very small part of our cost of graduate school. So there's time, the time that we're investing. In addition to that, there's the lost income, right? Because your peers are possibly working in a career and working their way up. And I've actually had this conversation with our boss, Dr. White, who said, you know, she made a choice to go straight to graduate school and continue on opposed to working. And she sometimes compares herself to some of her peers who took that time to maybe start their career, and then they maybe did graduate school either part-time or they established themselves in their career differently. So that is a consideration. So what happens is, because we're spending so much time focused on this, we often miss out on a lot of these experiences, including our family, relationships suffer, those kind of things. And that's not healthy. And that's what we want to remind you of, is that those should not become an opportunity cost of this degree. Your experiences of your travel, I'm so happy to hear that you do that. Your family, you don't want to sacrifice your family for this, right? There's going to be some sacrifices, but we have to work on that balance because we don't want to turn those into opportunity costs.
Alright, so we have
There it is.
a short video talking a little bit about self-care this week.
So we often think, when you think about self-care, you always think about how the time, right? How much do you think it takes to take care of ourselves? How much time does it take?
For me, it depends on the person. For me, my self-care is meditation. And
Okay.
I do 20 to 40 minutes a day, and I have to do it.
Perfect, and I love that you do that. How much does your travel time take?
It depends. I spend a lot of my time in Los Angeles because that's where I want to take my career after.
I love that.
And so, I don't know, just like the entire weekend I'm not in Vegas.
And so a lot of times when we talk to people about self-care, it's wonderful that you've been able to carve out a whole weekend. It's great that you can carve out 40 minutes because you appreciate how important, and you recognize that. But sometimes those of us who don't, like I would go, an entire weekend, I cannot give up an entire weekend. I'm hyperventilating thinking about it right now.
I'm with you. I'm a little anxious about it. I'm not even.
I'm like sweating in the brow here. She gives up a whole weekend. My life is really out of balance. But I think that sometimes some of us may need smaller baby steps. And so we want to talk about, all it can take is, you can start with just 10 minutes. And whether it's just 10, just taking 10 minutes for yourself, whether it's, you call it meditation, whatever you want to call it, but just starting to take that time to, even if it's reflection for you, whatever works for you, but setting aside just 10 minutes is a good way to start and kind of feel yourself slow down a little bit, feel that tension. I mean, get used to the idea of sitting with yourself for 10 minutes. And I know that's a lot in the presentation, but I do that on purpose so that I want to acknowledge that it's uncomfortable at the beginning. So the first time you do it, you're like, 10 minutes. That's what a microwave timer's for. I had to do that for a while. I had to set that microwave timer. I'm like, just don't even think until that microwave timer goes off. But and if it bothers you, start with 5. But just try that a little bit to slow yourself down, even for those few minutes.
And it's the idea that it will take practice. That some people get this idea that I'm going to start meditating now or start relaxing now, and then you sit down and you're like waiting for something to happen or waiting for it to do it as if it's something you just suddenly turn on. But just like anything else in life, it does take practice and it will get better. And that it's something that you can always work on, whether it's just starting out with 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it may be. It is a process that in the long run will help you. So sort of building upon that, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the health, the wellness wheel, and the sort of activities. So we do have a handout for this, but this is something that actually the Health and Wellness Center here at UNLV has sort of put out. But the idea is that you have a lot of different aspects that make you sort of a happy, healthy person. And then making sure that you go in and you actually examine each one of those. As you can kind of see from up there, the physical, the social, the intellectual. So I think sometimes we get stuck in the intellectual, all right, a lot. And even more so getting stuck in the intellectual in the sense that we're just learning what we're supposed to learn and learning what we're being told to learn, not even going outside of that and enjoying just the process of learning something new. Occupational, sometimes we get stuck in our jobs. Spiritual, making sure that we, no matter what type of spirituality you're into, that you actually address that. Environmental, seeing what's going on around you, whether it is getting out of here, getting out of the city and going to LA or somewhere else, or just even not spending all your time in the grad commons and getting up and walking around a little bit. And the last one, sort of emotional, making sure you're seeing how your emotions are going right now, whether you're too stressed, too happy, too sad, whatever it could be, but addressing it and sort of looking at that. That's sort of going to make sure that you have a balance as a whole person, because if you address all these sort of spots in your life, you're more likely to be a happier, healthier person.
In graduate school, there's some truths we should all have.
All right, first one is Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny are not real. I'm sorry if I'm breaking this news to you, but it's just one of those things. Columbus did not discover America. There's been plenty of people here before him. All right, he just happened to lay his claim. And the last one, time management and balance are sort of fallacies.
And that's according to Nancy Rappaport from our William S. Boyd School of Law. The reality was you're never going to be 100% managed or 100% balanced. Okay, so it's important to accept that fact. There are going to be times you're out of whack. Accept that. So don't freak out when that happens. We just try to achieve the best that we can. But there are going to be times when you're going to be too far on one side or on the other, and that's just life. Okay, so forgive yourself and let yourself know that real, true time management and true balance is a fallacy. It doesn't happen 100% of the time.
So this is the one I like to use, and it has a tendency to stick with people, but think of time management like yoga pants. You want them tight enough so it keeps everything under control, but you want it flexible enough so that you can still move around. All right, so you always want that flexibility, but in enough constraints to keep yourself going.
The average college freshman starts out at college with a reading level of a 7th grade when they did a study. That's scary, isn't it? That's the average college freshman level's reading level. The average U.S. newspaper reading level is 11th grade. Now, our average college textbook is 13.8. I didn't put grade because that sounds weird, but that's basically, about the middle of your freshman year. Alrighty? So now we've gone all through college. We supposedly had to get up from a 7th grade level all the way to a 13.8 level as we were reading. And now we're in grad school. And journal articles, which is the majority of what we read in grad school, right, have a reading level of 18.5. So that's the second year of graduate school, right? Or at least in the middle of your first year. So that's the average reading level. So how do we get from 13.8, which we've been reading all through college, to 18.5? It doesn't happen overnight. That's why we often have to read these journal articles more than one time. We're not used to, our brain isn't used to reading at that level. It's not that we're not capable, but it's going to take us some time to develop those skills. That's why you're going to spend, everybody says, oh, there's so much reading in grad school, right? Have you ever heard that? This is why. The numbers are really easy to understand. We just haven't been used to reading at that level, so it takes us a while to get used to it.
The big thing is that as you're getting higher in your sort of education career, you're starting being asked to do higher and higher level sort of learning. Has anybody ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy? All right, little short thing. Bloom's taxonomy sort of breaks down the learning process into a pyramid. So as an undergrad and sometimes in high school, you're asked to do like a lot of memorization, right? A lot of learning stuff. And that's the basic level, the lower order sort of levels of thinking. But we're starting to get to the upper levels where you're starting to take this information and you're being asked to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate, and then eventually create something. So you're starting to move up higher and higher in these levels. So you need to make sure that you sort of take that into account because this is transitioning into a new way. And once again, just like the reading, it's going to take longer to sort of sometimes get going on that. Writing papers is different. What's being asked of you is a little different. And once again, it's not that you're not capable of it, it's just learning a new skill and practicing that skill. So by the time you get to the end of it, you got the sort of paper writing thing down. You're expected to sort of even go in understanding all sort of citation techniques and all this stuff that you're supposed to be understanding when you do write a paper, which is a huge thing. I don't know if you all know the APA booklet front and back. No. Yeah. So my big example is that I used to be an MLA person. Then I moved to education and they asked me to start doing APA. One of the first things they caught me on was you don't put 2 spaces after a period. I had to train myself, my thumb, not to do that. Fun fact, they changed it back. So but that's here nor there. But it's like an idea of like, I know how to write, but I need to learn how to write in a different style and actually know how I'm supposed to be doing that. Making sure you're supporting everything with evidence and reading and gathering that evidence within articles. And then utilizing a lot more resources now. Started getting deep into those databases. I know all of you.
Which I love.
I do enjoy, and then doing what I call the rabbit hole of research, of looking at resources and checking out all these different articles and exploring a little bit. Because sometimes you might feel like you're just messing around, but doing that exploration through your resources to find that stuff that you need.
It's like going down the rabbit hole, right? And how do you plan rabbit hole on a clock time management system, right? Like, how many hours is the rabbit hole? You don't know till you get into the rabbit hole how long it's going to take you to get through it. So this is where we have to have that flexibility. And sometimes where I personally feel lists work better than time blocks for our purposes, because it may be that we need to find so many articles. Well, to be honest with you, I can't tell you until I read these articles. I may happen to be lucky and find 3 great articles right away. I may have to go through 50. It's hard to budget that, so sometimes lists may work better for those kind of projects. And then our coursework and content really changes at grad school. I'm in the doctoral program for education, and our very first classes, our cohort was divided into higher ed and K-12 professionals who were going through this program together. So we had some core classes together, and then we broke up depending on our specialty. Well, the first core class we were in together, the K-12 people were all talking about IEPs.
I mean, don't you mean DRC?
Yes, that's what they meant. You probably may not know either of these, but an IEP is an individualized education plan for our K-12 people.
Well, the DRC is the Disability Resource Center that we use here.
We didn't know that, though, when we first got together. And so having to learn that terminology really takes a lot more time.
We love acronyms. We throw those acronyms out like no other, and we stretch even the names of these institutions so we can get a cool sounding acronym. But I think one of the big ones that I've struggled with or started to learn is new content, like statistics. I was very much an English person, so you started throwing numbers at me. It's something I had to learn how to interpret. It's not that I didn't know how to do math, but it's taking in new information and being able to translate that back out.
And it's a lot more active learning in grad school. So you don't get to be that lurker. No more lurking. They expect you to participate, multitask.
And I think the biggest thing is challenging, right? It is going to be a challenge, but I think never we should interpret a challenge as a bad thing. It's just something that is going to help you grow and help you improve as a person, as an academic, or in your career, whatever direction you all are going to be going in the future.
So you have so many resources, and that's the big thing, is you're learning how to use these resources to help you get some time gains. So one of them is the people who put on this program today. Your Rebel Grad Center or Grad Rebel Center, I think it's Rebel Grad Center. I'm not a graduate student here, so I don't know, but I think that's a great place to look.
I mean, librarians, each subject has their specific librarians as they're trained to help you sort of research and help you maybe find those articles or look for somewhere else. Because I know even this semester, I know how to find my research, but I wanted another set of eyes and some new techniques to maybe find, because sometimes we do get into that rut of this worked for all my papers, but maybe I want to find something else and add something else to it.
And so many people don't know we have these research guides. They can point you into the right databases to look at, so you don't have to stumble and tumble to find the right databases. They'll tell you, these are the perfect databases for this topic. Look here, don't look there, or here's some great authors that are key that you should be citing if you're talking about these topics. So is a time gain. That library guide, those research guides are huge time gains for you. So if you haven't had a chance to research them yet, go on there, just type in library guides. I think they call them, we used to call them lib guides in the old days, but I don't know if they call them lib guides or library guides, but take a look
I
for
think
them.
they're lib guides here. And then your cohort, your classmates, right? Either whether they've been through it or they're starting to go through it, like just seeing what others have done and always being willing and helpful to take that advice, but yet also give that advice. Because I'm sure all of you remember that time when you first got into grad school and like figuring things out and just making sure that you share your ideas, because I think that's a big thing too in grad school, is much this more collaborative sort of idea.
You want to share the new resource we learned about today?
The Writing Center also currently has graduate level workshops for writing. and they meet a lot with graduate level students. And that it's not just sort of a resource for somebody that needs help with writing, but it's a resource for everybody, even if you just need another pair of eyes on it. Because I know we've all had that situation of, I've been staring at this paper forever, I do not want to see it anymore. I need somebody to just get it away for a second. I don't hate you, paper, but.
But sometimes you read what you thought you wrote, but you might not have really written that. We had that happen on the calendar we produced this year. Several of us looked at it, and
This is true.
October went 4-5-4 instead of 4-5-6. And multiple of those had looked at this calendar, but it's just one of those things that because you're looking for what you're looking for, you can miss it. And I also want you to think about yourself as a resource. And it sounds crazy, but you can't spell success without you, and that's so true. But you got here, and remember that you got here for a reason. So you know. So sometimes when you're feeling that self-doubt, just kind of take that deep breath and go, okay, let me look at myself from a different perspective. What would I tell somebody else in this situation? And then tell that to yourself. Because sometimes we forget that we do have some knowledge because we kind of get stuck within ourselves or overwhelmed. But kind of take that deep breath and almost advise yourself what you would tell somebody else in that situation. And probably for the most part, you're going to be right because you got here for a reason. You're not here by accident. They didn't just let you in because they liked you. You're here for a reason. You do have those resources, so be comfortable and confident in yourself.
Any questions?
Thank you so much for attending.